Lucas's hands were like steel bands around her wrists as he dragged Eden out of Bianca's room, where she stood with her gun trained on Rory. Eden let him pull her away, although every molecule of her being was screaming at her to fight and struggle and get Rory away from that woman and her cruelty. Rory's face was tight and hard, a mask that she could see beginning to crack. He'd been so brave, taking every turn through the hive in stride. How much more could he take? She'd agreed to work with the hive to protect him, and it had still ended with a laser pointed between his eyes. She bit her cheek to keep from screaming. As soon as Lucas had wrestled her out the door, although she didn't struggle, she didn't exactly cooperate either, and the door had shut between her and Bianca, Eden dropped to the ground. Lucas caught her but pitched forward from the effort, so Eden twisted and pushed up against the floor. The top of her head collided with Lucas's chin with a crack. He grunted and stumbled back, dropping his hold on her entirely and rubbing his chin. "Stop fighting me," he hissed at her. "We don't have much time." "We've got plenty," Eden growled back. Lucas thrust his hand into his pocket, and she braced herself for whatever was coming. Instead of a weapon, a brass key sat in the palm of his hand. Some kind of trick or trap. Although, she thought, they were already so trapped down here, why bother? "I can't stop her," Lucas said. "I can't." "Why?" "But you can. She'll check the cell before we leave for the launch site. I have to lock you in. Use this. Find the coordinates of the launch pad in her office, and find us. You can stop her. Or we can, together. But I can't stop her alone." His eyes, dark and pleading, held only the truth, but still Eden hesitated. He seemed earnest, sure. This act of defiance against Bianca was strange for him, though. "How can I trust you? I know she needs to be stopped." The Tai Chi was one thing when it was just a satellite, but that weapon in her hands will be no less dangerous than in Dr. Abraham's. "Come on, Eden. Be serious. I don't want to die." She believed him then. She nodded. She let him lock her in the cell again, the same cell she'd been in before. He let the door shut behind him, and she held the key so tightly in her hand that it bit into the soft skin. The darkness in the cell was the same. This time, Eden was too wound up to sit in the twilight and wait for Bianca to peer inside. He could have been lying, she admitted to herself as she paced back and forth in the cell. It was too narrow, too low-ceilinged. She wanted to burst out of her skin. Time passed, and eventually a shadow passed in front of the door, and dark eyes peered inside.
Unmistakably Bianca.
Eden came up to the window, hating that she had to look up at her. Their eyes met. No words exchanged, but enough was said. Bianca's footsteps echoed down the corridor as she left, 2 echoes following dutifully behind her. Lucas and Rory. Eden started counting when the footsteps disappeared. She timed her breaths to her count and tried to slow her racing heart. The room was still too small. There wasn't enough air down here anyways. When she reached 100, she slid the brass key into the lock and grinned when the lock clicked open obediently. It worked. The corridor was empty, but Eden crept as noiselessly as she could back to Bianca's office, retracing her steps easily. The office was unlocked. Eden let the door shut gently behind her, wondering how much longer her luck would last. Footsteps outside the door. Eden held her breath and crouched behind the bookcase. They passed quickly, and then there was silence again, broken only by what sounded like a low hum from the glowing vase in the center of the room. The pink glow was hard to see by, but she crossed to Bianca's desk in the corner. It was worn and heavily used, with initials carved in a heart in one corner. Eden wondered where Bianca had found the desk, how she'd moved it down into the base unseen. The ceiling was too low, the light too dim, the walls too rough-hewn and uneven. Even with the plush rug, the steel beneath was cold. Eden shivered as she stood in front of the desk, hesitating. She sifted through each desk drawer, ducking every time she heard footsteps outside. The activity beyond the office was picking up. Eden focused on her breathing and her sorting. There. Finally, she found a piece of paper in the drawer, ripped from a notebook hastily. A short set of directions was scribbled on it. Half-mile towards paradise. Green door. That must be it. She pocketed the scrap and hurried to the door. She'd been searching too long. Too late already. Hand on the door, she paused. A pair of tables flanked the door. She checked the drawers. Nothing. Eden spun, eyes searching the room hungrily, until a glint of silver from atop the bookcase caught her eye. She had to jump to reach it, but eventually her fingers caught the cold metal, and she tucked the laser gun into the waist of her pants. The cold was comfort, security. She crept out of the office and retraced her steps towards the common room, and from there, the ladder up to the rail tunnel. She poked her head out of the door to the rush of an oncoming train. Eden yelped and fell backwards, almost tumbling headlong back down the ladder. Breathing hard, she waited and listened, and when the tunnel was quiet again, she began running down the track. Her steps were heavy at first and clumsy, but she fell into rhythm quickly and beat the ground as hard as she could. She had to be fast enough. Rory was waiting for her, counting on her. In a way, everyone was. The rumble of the tunnel sent a spike of adrenaline through her body, and she threw herself against the wall of the tunnel, fighting against the suction of the train pulling her along with it. Her hair broke free of her ponytail and whipped around her head in a blonde storm, beating against her face and her neck. When the train was past, she fell to the ground and gasped for breath. The half-mile passed more quickly than she expected, and she came to the green door, and Eden realized that she was alone in this, after all. For all Lucas's help until this point, he would side with whoever he thought would work out best for him. That much was clear. Eden stood outside the green door, frozen, and hoped it was her. And for all of Rory's love and loyalty, he would be no assistance in a fight. Bianca would be ready for a fight. That fire in her eyes, the cold passion in her voice. And Eden was alone. Eden took a deep breath and pushed the green door open, and was confronted with another ladder. The room was small and dark, containing only the ladder leading down, and lit by only one bare bulb above. There was no point hesitating. Eden took the ladder down deeper into the belly of the planet. She heard their voices about 5 feet from the bottom of the ladder and paused to listen, feeling her pulse in her hands and in her ears. Bianca was angry. Her words were unintelligible, but her tone was unmistakable. Something wasn't working out for her. Eden's heart missed a beat when she heard Rory's pleading voice murmur something and then cry out. She scrambled down the last few rungs of the ladder and dropped into the corridor below, following the voices towards a softly glowing light in the room at the end of the corridor. She paused in the doorway. The ceiling of the room was strange. 2 panels that met in the center of the room, wired and mechanized to presumable slide apart. Eden could see the reason why just below. The rocket housing the Tai Chi gleamed cruelly, its nose pointed up towards the panels. The room was wide and empty besides the behemoth that was the Tai Chi, but off the side of the room was a door cracked open. The voices came from within. Eden crept forward, through the shadow of the beast, towards the room. She took her laser from her boot where she had stored it and held it solidly in her hands. She took a deep breath. Eden was struck again by the fact that she was alone, facing Haven's greatest threat. The weight of the gun in her hand was comfortable, natural, and made her feel braver. Bianca would not be expecting her. She had a chance. Another cry, sharp and full of pain, came from the room, and there was no more holding back. Eden shoved through the ajar door, laser gun preceding her into the control room. The walls were covered with screens, all displaying things that Eden had no mental energy to decipher. It didn't matter what was on the screens. Bianca was standing behind Rory at the control panel in the center of the room. He was bleeding from his forehead, the trickle of blood dripping from his hairline down his face and onto the floor. His left eye was swollen shut, and he hadn't noticed her entry. He typed clumsily away at the control panel. Even at the distance, Eden could see his hands shaking. "I'm trying," he said. "Really, just give me time." Bianca hadn't noticed her yet either, so focused she was on Rory's work, but Lucas's eyes lit up as they met Eden's, and he nodded. He touched the laser gun at his side. She tried to trust him.
Eden kiliret her troat.
It was time to confront Bianca, but the wail of an alarm drowned out her words. "What's going on?"
Bianca shrieked.
"I don't know." Rory's panic cut through the alarm. "My credentials tripped some sort of alarm. Make it stop." Rory hesitated, and Bianca jabbed her gun into the back of his head. "Put it down, Bianca. It's over," Eden called over the alarm. She leveled her weapon at Bianca. She turned and betrayed only a split second of surprise before she grinned wickedly at Eden, keeping her own gun jammed into the back of Rory's neck. "Too bad it has to end this way, Eden. But really, it's for the greater good. Trust me." "Put your weapon down," Eden repeated through gritted teeth. "Put your weapon down," Eden said, standing in the doorway like an angel of justice. She took a step into the room, her own laser gun pointed over Rory's head at Bianca. Where had she gotten that? Her eyes met Rory's for a moment and traversed his face. He knew he looked worse than he felt and tried to give her a reassuring nod. In response, Bianca jabbed her laser gun, still warm from the warning shot she'd fired between his feet, harder into Rory's skull. He tried not to shiver. Eden took another step into the room, her attention fully on Bianca now. "Stay back, or I'll figure this out without Dr. Lawrence," Bianca shouted over the alarm. Into Rory's ear she hissed, "Keep working. You know you can't do that. You need him alive," Eden said. "I don't need both of you. In fact, you have outlived your usefulness to me. Now, you're just irritating me. Bianca, look at what you're doing," Eden said. "You want to hurt Cardinal Enterprises? So do I. But this isn't the way. Innocent people will suffer." "They're all complicit in my eyes," Bianca said coolly. "How much longer, Dr. Lawrence?" "It's impossible," Rory said. He was braver in Eden's presence, and for once his voice didn't waver. "I won't help you." She struck him across the face with the gun, and his face exploded with pain again. Blood filled his mouth, salty and hot. Dark shapes danced in front of his eyes. Rory staggered back away from the control panels, holding his face. Bianca's scream cut through his haze, as well as a burst of light that filled the control room and momentarily blinded him again. He could smell something burning, and Bianca was howling. Her gun had clattered to the floor, and she fell back against the wall, cradling her singed arm. Eden kept her smoking laser gun trained on Bianca. Her howls subsided into a low chuckle as she staggered upright. The wound on her arm had been cauterized by the laser, so there was no blood, but her left arm was smoking and the fabric of her shirt was singed and smoking. The look in her eyes could only be described as deranged. "You think you've beaten me?"
Bianca shouted.
"You think you can? Give up, Bianca," Eden said over the wail of the alarm. Rory half expected to see cards spill through the door at any second. Lucas, fidgeting beside him, clearly had the same idea. "Can't you make that stop?" he hissed at Rory. "Afraid not," Rory said. He wouldn't approach the control panel again for anything. "I'll never give up," Bianca spat. "Never." Not until the cancer of cardinal enterprises is wiped from the face of the planet. At the expense of the city, of all the innocents. Martyrs, Bianca said, relishing the word. Martyrs for the greater good. You're mad. Maybe, Bianca admitted. She grinned cruelly at Eden and then dove across the floor, reaching for her gun with her left hand. Just as her fingers closed around the gun, another blast of light filled the control room and Bianca was still. Eden dropped her gun as if it had burnt her, as if it were her who had been destroyed instead of Bianca, who lay smoking on the floor. They were silent, the three of them, as the alarm wailed around them. Rory was staring at her, his eyes filled with tears and something else. Fear maybe, disgust, having just seen her kill a woman with her back turned. Later. Eden tried to shake the thought from her head. She'd deal with this later. They were still in crisis. Her own eyes were unexpectedly blurred with moisture, but she blinked it back. They weren't finished here. Far from it. Can you destroy it? She asked Rory. Does it have some kind of self-destruct? Rory nodded slowly. Can I make it blow up? Yeah, of course. Will it reach the city? It might, he said, hesitating. It shouldn't. Would we have time to get out of here? She tried to keep the hope from her voice. She might end up a martyr after all. You could just show me which buttons to push, okay? Rory frowned at her. We'll have time to run, he said. He stood at the control panel, and his hands began dancing across the panel, more quickly and skillfully than he had before. Her own hands were shaking. She stuffed them in her pockets. Lucas, a green look on his face, pulled the gun from Bianca's limp hand and stuffed it in his waistband. We'll probably have company soon. Can we hurry? We? Eden repeated, arching an eyebrow at him. Don't you have a terrorist cell to return to? I hate to say it, he said, but there was a hint of humor to his voice that suggested he did not hate to say it. I think I'm stuck with you guys now. There is no hive without Bianca. Eden considered it for a moment. Where could she and Rory go after this? She looked up at the corner of the control room, just as she suspected. A camera was blinking in the corner, swiveling to catch their every movement. She waved at it. There was no going home now. Not for any of them. The wail of the alarm changed abruptly, finding a new, faster rhythm. That's our cue, Rory said, leaping up from the control panel. Let's not linger, huh? Where do we go from here, Eden? They both looked at her, with time they didn't have, waiting for her answer. It's a long walk to paradise, Eden said, but I think it's our best shot. It might be our only shot. We can at least let them know where their resources have been going. The ladder seemed shorter on the way up, and the trio hurried up it as fast as they could. Outside the green door, they turned toward paradise instead of haven. The tunnel shook violently, dirt shaking down from the ceiling, and Eden threw herself against the wall. That's not a train, Rory said. Footsteps were echoing down the tunnel, coming their way quickly. Let's move, Eden said, letting Rory lean against her. He was in rough shape, but he moved beside her as quickly as he could, and Lucas followed behind them, a laser gun in each hand. They ducked inside the first maintenance room they passed, panting in the darkness. The footsteps didn't reach them, and Eden assumed they had turned off at the green door. It wouldn't be long before they discovered what had happened. She peeked her head out the door. Once minutes had passed with no sound of footsteps. The tunnel was empty. I think it's safe, she said. I doubt that, Lucas said. Do you have a better idea? She asked. We should keep moving. His silence was answer enough. He pushed past her and stepped out into the tunnel and took off towards paradise in a brisk walk. Eden moved to follow him, but Rory's hand caught her arm and stopped her. "Hey," he said. "Are you okay? What happened back there? Thank you." She thought of Bianca laying on the floor. "Don't thank me," she said. "You saved me," he insisted. "You saved my life. All of ours, really." She smiled at his insistent gratitude and impulsively wrapped his lanky body in a hug. He winced, and she wondered how many other injuries he had. They were both scarred from this forever, she imagined, inside and out. At least the exterior wounds would heal quickly. "We saved each other," she said. "Together. Hurry up." Lucas shouted, his voice echoing through the tunnel, caution clearly in the wind. "I'm not waiting forever." Eden and Rory couldn't help but laugh. Deep true laughter like they hadn't had since before all of this. Since they were children, probably. Their laughter filled the room and spilled into the tunnel, and soon Lucas was laughing too, at the ridiculousness of all of it. It was gone as quickly as it started, and they marched on into the darkness towards paradise.